Hello, my name's Tony Villano. I've been very interested in restorative justice in the last 6 years and have been volunteering in a lot of organizations around Northern California where I live. I've actually taken some courses in restorative justice that have been college courses also. And I would like to talk about what I've learned and the impact of restorative justice in um, our systems. In criminal justice, the focus is punishment. Inflict harm on the offender to even the score. Incapacitation, remove the threat from society. Deterrence, inflict enough harm to scare people straight. And rehabilitation, offer tools and support to change behavior. People in the system have said this order is significant. Rehabilitation is the last and the least. Sometimes people think that they're coddling criminals when they're trying to rehabilitate them. The criminal justice asks simple questions. What laws have been broken? Who did it? What do the offenders deserve? There are some things missing. Why were the laws broken? Who was harmed? What harm was caused and how can it be repaired? Who did it? Why? What about the community? How can we address the source of this behavior? What about how can the victim be made as whole as possible? Those are secondary or hardly even talked about. Issues with the criminal justice system. It sets up an adversarial process. The prosecutor is incentivized to win cases and be tough on crime. The defense attorney is incentivized to protect the accused rights. And this sets up a system where financial resources is a major influencer of the outcome. There is no place for the victim's needs. There is no place for the community needs. The results of the criminal justice system. It's expensive. Incarceration is greater than costs more than $100,000 per year per inmate. I've seen numbers as high as 150 and nothing lower than 100. It's ineffective. The recidivation rates are high. 55% in 5 years, 83% in 9 years. Many people are going back to prison. The victim's needs are not part of the system. The community needs are not part of the system. The error rate for capital convictions is greater than 10%. This is just looking at cases by the Innocence Project and other people that are dealing with capital convictions. The outcome is dependent on the resources and the social status of the parties involved. Restorative justice has a different perspective. Who has been harmed? Who's invested in this issue? What are their needs? Whose obligations are these? What are the causes? What are the underlying circumstances? What is needed to make things as right as possible? Well, the victim wants accountability, reparation, freedom from fear, and to have a say in the outcome. The offender wants a chance to take responsibility, an opportunity to be heard, forgiveness, reconciliation, and support, also freedom from fear. and dignity. In my studies, I got a new definition for dignity. And this is very moving to me. Dignity is being heard, having a voice, having a say, having agency, being respected, being a member of the community. And integrity is wholeness and true to one's principles, being accountable for one's actions, and taking responsibility for the harm one caused. Restorative justice is a dignified and integrous process that honors the needs of the offenders, the victims, the community, and resolves all the harm as much as possible. The victim describes the impact of the harm. The community describes the impact of the harm to the community. The offender acknowledges the harm caused. Victim, community, and offender work out a way to repair the harm as much as possible. The result of restorative justice: offender takes the responsibility for the harm caused. Victim, community, and offender work together to repair any harm. The victim is made as whole as possible. The error rate is zero. Why? Because the offender took responsibility. It isn't some sentence imposed from the outside based on testimony. The cost is significantly lower. Restorative justice sessions are less expensive than court. Incarceration rates are lower for restorative justice, and recidivism is reduced. The result is not dependent on the economic or social status of the parties involved. No. What follows is a video from Sujita Balia. She's an attorney. She was director of Restorative Justice Project at Impact Justice in Oakland. And she was also awarded a MacArthur Grant. This is a simple story and very moving. Da dun dun da da dun 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 da dun dun da da dun. We received a case about a stolen car. And we reached out to the young person, and he pretty quickly took responsibility for it, and was very open to meeting with his victim and making it right, and explained that he was really poor, but he was willing to get a job and try to figure out, how to do right by the victim. So we reached out to the victim, and the victim was extremely unhappy that the case had been diverted. She actually knew a little bit about diversion because she worked for a law enforcement type entity, and was adamant that she had been out of pocket $4,000 in costs because of this car, and wanted to see $4,000. And so in meeting with the young person and his family, his mother is undocumented, working multiple jobs. They were living in the most in the kinds of poverty that we just shouldn't have in the United States, with so many other people's children living with them just to have a place to eat. And I knew that this mother and this young man were not coming up with $4,000. And so the person I was training at the time asked me, so are we going to send the case back? Because there's no way this woman's getting what she wants. So I go back to her and I say, would you have any interest in doing this, even if $4,000 might not be the outcome? Is there some other reason to do this? And she'd brought a friend with her that day, and he said, I would really love for you to move forward. And she said, I would just want to meet with this kid and tell him that what he did wasn't okay. And her friend said, I really, really like to meet with this young man too. And so on the day of the conference, it was very powerful. Her supporter, the person who had come with her, at one point, as the youth who'd stolen the car
couldn't remember what color the car was. And it became evident that he'd stolen many cars. And the victim is getting angrier and angrier, and you're never going to learn your lesson. And at this point, her friend leans in and he says, I know you. And my heart stopped because I was like, oh, we usually research these things better. And I had no idea there was a pre-existing relationship between these two parties. And he says, I know you because I used to be you. And he proceeds to tell the most powerful story about how he himself got caught up in stealing cars and it derailed his life and how he got his life back on track. And it was as if the rest of the room disappeared, and this young man and this man who turned his life around engage in a dialogue about how does one turn one's life around. And he says, you have to stop hanging out with your homies in the way that you used to, but don't cut them out of your heart. Just don't include them in every aspect of your life. So you show up for the baptism, but you don't stay for the after party, right? And you always say, I got to get to work, and they respect that. So what makes you happy? What do you believe in, about yourself? Or what are you good at? And the kid puffs up and he says, I'm a really good artist. And his mother starts laughing. And she says, you can't pay this woman back $4,000 with your art. And just then the victim jumps in and she says, oh, yes, he can. Yes, he can, actually. She was so moved by this dialogue, right, that she says, if he paints me a Tinkerbell as tall as I am, it's like she's about 5 feet tall as I am, I'll forgive all the debt. And we're all looking at each other like, a Tinkerbell? I'm sorry, did she say Tinkerbell? So I start taking notes, and she's describing the exact Tinkerbell and what color the Tinkerbell needed to be. And it had to be an old school one without too much cleavage. So she's very particular about the Tinkerbell. And the kid is really excited, but he's also like, I don't know how I would canvas and what she's describing. And I'm like, we'll find you a community artist person who will help you with this. And so I was thinking of my friend Evan, who I knew would definitely be interested in doing this. And so ultimately, the young man does paint this. He just within a few weeks, he got a job, he raised enough money for all the art supplies. He wanted to do it himself. Painted the most amazing rendition of Tinkerbell on canvas, and the victim asked him to bring it to her home and help him install it. And then he ended up getting involved with other community art projects and actually getting involved with the program at Community Works, where he had been involved in this case, and just helping out other kids who'd gotten in trouble. So his life turned around completely, and he stayed out of trouble consistently after that. And the Tinkerbell was really beautiful. But I think what's really, when people ask what do victims want, it's different in every case. And I always think you never know, it might be Tinkerbell. Like, you have no idea what is going to leave a crime victim satisfied. So some people might say, oh, that's soft on crime. He stole a car and he gets to paint something. But if that's what the victim wanted and that's what keeps him out of trouble for the rest of his life, then we should be really happy about Tinkerbell.
Yeah, I'm always moved by that story. Um, let's talk about restorative justice, where it came from. So it actually has ancient roots. It traces back to indigenous and traditional cultures worldwide, Africa, North America, New Zealand, where community-based conflict resolution was common. For example, the Maori practices in New Zealand emphasize collective responsibility and healing. The modern emergence movement began in the 1970s in Canada and the United States. Began victim offender reconciliation programs focusing on direct dialogue between victims and offenders. Uh, Kind of the father of this was Howard Zare. He's up in Michigan, and everybody kind of defers to him and what he's done. Um, the This has expanded in the 80s and 90s and grew into a broader community-based approach, inclu- including family group conferencing and circle sentencing based on indigenous traditions. The family groups conferencing is not part of um, a center, but it actually talks has um, uh, roots in how we do restorative justice and deals with making decisions as a family. And it works in schools also. Um, Restorative justice is adopted in various contexts, including schools, workplaces, post conflict societies, such as South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission after apartheid. They did this in Rwanda too, after to heal after the massive problem they had between the Houthis and the and the Tutsis in Rwanda. Um, our restorative justice continues to evolve in integrating technology, online mediation, and I've been doing a lot of that personally, expanding into diverse legal systems and how it works. Assess the situation for a conference, evaluate the case, get consent from all parties involved, and readiness. The offender is ready to take responsibility. You can't move forward without any of those three. Prepare individual meetings with each participant separately to explain the process, discuss expectations, assess emotional readiness, and to provide support. Develop an agenda, structure and goals, logistics, a neutral venue, a time that works for everyone, invite stakeholders, and prepare the facilitators with training, emphasize neutrality, plan for disruptions. How it works, ground rules and guidelines. Allow the facilitators to guide the meeting. Uh, and let the participants know when the facilitators are guiding the meeting if you feel something's unfair. You should tell the facilitators, and we can deal with that. One person speaks at a time. Each speaker uses I statements. Notice it, not you statements, no accusatory stuff. It's how you felt, what happened. Each participant agrees to summarize what they heard. Participants agree to be as honest as possible, and participants agree that the meeting is confidential. This last part is important because if what happens in the meeting doesn't end up in a courtroom. Questions restorative justice meeting. What happened? What were you thinking at the time? What have you thought about since? Who has been affected? How have they been affected? What is needed to make things as right as possible?